process of using nouns is discouraged in the basic course among inexperienced students. And the process, once you get down the basics and you learn how to do controlled remote viewing, then we introduce a method by which you can get nouns. And there are many times in a controlled remote viewing session at the upper levels, once you have gained really good sight contact, that you will get, there's a car. And sure enough, there's a car. And I mean, you're so certain of it that you have to say, no, this is a car. I can go back and describe it for you if you want, but I know there's a car there, and you're correct. Uh, Inexperienced viewers will also be that certain that there's a car there, but they're quite often wrong. An experienced remote viewer, when they say there's a car there, there's a car there. And I know one time I heard the story about Joe was given a target, a practice target, and just messed it up, something terrible. And so when he got his feedback, he said to Skip, he said, I'm sorry, you gave me the wrong feedback. Skip checked, and sure enough, the wrong target was in the wrong envelope. He went and got the real target for those coordinates, and Joe had nailed the session. And I always thought, man, if I could ever be half that good. And not long afterwards, the same thing happened. The feedback was handed to me, and I was so certain because I had experienced that sight that I just handed it back and I said, you better check your envelopes because you got the wrong feedback. And sure enough, they had. And, uh, you know, I'll admit to being human, beaming and proud and everything else. But the remote viewing can come to that point. Now, many times though, you'll get a noun and you'll say, there's a car there. And the noun will be, there will not be a car there. However, it's called a symbolic noun. Okay. And if you learn to recognize those, which an experienced remote viewer can, you realize that that symbolizes something. We have a tool called the Mini Phase 5, which works with symbolic nouns. And in this you say, okay, at its most basic level, what does car symbolize to me? Oh, well, it means going someplace. Oh, okay, getting somewhere. And what has happened is there is some project or something like that where the activity that's going on the site is actually going to take them to another place. And so you have seen a symbolic car. And this last class I had, the target for one of the students was a Buddhist temple. And the viewer kept seeing, and it was an advanced class, the viewer kept describing a bridge spanning from here to there. And we said, okay, where is here? And he would describe this city. It was a Buddhist temple in India. And he would describe the city, and we'd say, where is there? Oh, it's, I can't tell, I can't see it. It's, amorphous and all that. And what he was seeing was a physical symbol, a bridge spanning Earth to wherever, and he was describing Buddhism, but he had no word to say, this. And so many times a noun will come up like that, and it's very symbolic. In remote viewing, in controlled remote viewing, you find out that that kind of noun feels different when you say it. And when you learn through practice to recognize that feeling, then we say, okay, let's mini P5 that, and we'll break out the symbology behind it so we'll know what the target, how it applies to the target. And, you know, we've been at this for 30 years now. And we've learned an awful lot through thousands and thousands of sessions, deeply analyzing what remote viewers do and how they do it, and patterns they have, and feelings they get when they get a noun, and so on. And so we have learned to use these tools to break out this information. This is very much a science, very much. A little bit ago, I was saying that remote viewing is a reflection of your life. Okay. On some days you work well, on some days you don't. On some days you feel well, on some days you don't. Mm-hmm. On some days you're organized. Other days, I mean, you can walk from here into that room and you have no idea why you just did it. Right. And humans are that way. And so the fact that some days you're good and some days you're bad, mm-hmm. Is partly a human trait. Now, there have been studies done, scientific studies, on a thing called local sidereal time. Very few people know what it is. It's an astronomical thing. Let's say the sun is right here, the earth is right here, and you're facing the earth, and a star is out here. Let's say Vega, okay? Solar time, it's noon. Vega time, it's also noon. 3 months later, the Earth has moved around to here, so solar time is not the same as Vega time, okay? Star time is different from solar time. And so there's a progression every day. What the research has found is that at 1300 hours, 47 minutes every day, the point where you are on the Earth is facing the most it will toward the center of our galaxy. This is star time, and it's 1300 hours, 40 minutes, 7 minutes. Star time, not the time you see on your watch, okay? And that at 1800 hours, you're facing toward the center of the galaxy. At 1347, you're facing the most you will face out of the galaxy toward empty space. And the times aren't 12 hours apart because the galaxy is like this, our solar system is like this, and our Earth is at a different angle and all that. All those angles, you know, come into play there. And so those two times, when you're facing the most out of the galaxy that you will, all psychics, no matter controlled remote viewers, your natural psychic ability is going to be 200 to 300 times percent better than at any other time during the day. At 1800 hours, when you're facing toward the center of the galaxy, don't even try. Generally, that's a psychic's nightmare. It's the psychic nighttime because it just seems to go away. And there has been a lot of research on this, and it seems to actually work in practice. And so this is something that natural psychics, as well as remote viewers, are learning to watch because you know it does make a difference. However, we're human. Sometimes we're having a great day, and at 1800 hours, hey, we're having such a great day, you can have success. Sometimes you're having a bad day, and even at the best times, you're not going to do well. And so those two influences work together. And so If a person says, oh, I have a sidereal watch and it's 1,800 hours, so I can't do any good now. That's self-fulfilling prophecy. You convince yourself you can't do well. And so I tell people generally to ignore it, but to keep track of your session. When you get feedback, you've got the sidereal time, and you can find out for yourself when you work best, when you don't work best, and so on. There have been many theories about why local sidereal time affects psychic functioning. Many people have said, well, it must be the gravitational pull of the center of the galaxy. Okay. The gravitational pull of the center of the galaxy is less than that chair has on you. Okay. That can't affect it, okay? They say, well, it's radiation. They can't find any radiation. They say, well, it's background radiation or something like that. And everybody comes up with their own theory, and nobody can prove anything. The fact is, it's like the word matrix. Everybody doesn't want to say, I don't know, so they come up with a theory. And that way they get the grants and the study grants and all that. When the fact is, we have no idea. You know, we don't know what makes psychic functioning work. Computer mapping of the brain and entire body has been tried, and it seems to show the functioning of the brain when a person is remote viewing. However, turning that information around and saying, you can remote view better if you will just excite this part of your brain. Mm-hmm. Well, how do you do that? You know? Okay. I mean, you know, the study has been there, and it's given us information, but it's not given us any help. The hope is that as we understand things more in the future, we can learn more. But the fact is that right now, at our stage in history, we're just mucking along, doing the best we can, and, you know, we're getting there. We're learning the techniques, we're learning the physical things, and the science is there, and it should be. The research is there. But at this point, the research hasn't helped any. Actually, it does, but the camera videotaping the viewer doesn't help the viewer. If you have a monitor there who then watches the films and says, okay, when was he most on target? What is his physical reactions? And the monitor learns to read the viewer, which is what we teach, by the way, in the school, then it has helped. But we tape many sessions, and what we find is that since this is physical in nature, mm-hmm. the physical reactions of the viewer can be read. So we train the monitor. We train the monitor to read what's called micromovements. The monitor will read all of your micromovements. When you get embarrassed, you blush. When you get sad, you tear up and things like that. And so those are natural micromovements that can be said about anybody. We even train the monitors to read micromovements down to the idea of when the pupils contract, mm-hmm. the viewer has seen something at the site that is bright or that is exciting even. The pupils will contract. When the pupils dilate all of a sudden, the monitor knows that the viewer has seen something sexual at the site. And we have learned through thousands and thousands of sessions to read a viewer's physical movements like this. Then after the monitor learns to read all of those physical movements and micro movements and all, then we have a thing called controlled remote viewing micromovements. And that is the monitor knowing all of the real micromovements will know what's not a micromovement. And so the monitor will wait until the viewer, let's say, suddenly goes off target. And let's say the viewer adjusts their paper right at that moment. The monitor will give some physical signal that the viewer's conscious mind doesn't see, but the subconscious mind sees it very clearly. And it thinks, I saw that. Okay? And then the monitor waits and waits and waits. And the viewer is working along maybe a month later, gets off target and adjusts his paper, the two combined. And the monitor goes, thanks, I saw that. About the third or fourth time that happens, the subconscious, which is very smart, realizes I can tell my monitor when old dummy up here goes off target, quits listening to me. And from that point on, the monitor doesn't have to know what the target is. He sits over there and watches, and sure enough, and the monitor makes a note to the analyst, middle of page 6, viewer goes off target, garbage starts. And then you train in a micro movement to tell the monitor when the viewer gets back on target. Now, the viewer can never consciously learn what these movements are because he'll start faking them, you know. And so this is a third language in a remote viewing session that goes on between the viewer's subconscious mind and the monitor's conscious mind. And all the time that information about the target is going out onto the paper, information about the session is going on between the viewer's subconscious and the monitor's conscious mind, so that the conscious mind of the monitor can take notes, tell the analyst where the good parts are and where the garbage is and all that. And in doing that, we can take a viewer who has, let's say, 70% accuracy, and by selecting only the good parts, because we have watched the micro movements, by selecting only the good parts, we can take the information that is good and have maybe 90% accuracy. By the same token, we database everything. And we say, you know, this perception the viewer got, it's a color, okay? This other perception is a size or a shape or something like that. And we analyze these sessions, we split them up and put them into databases, and over a period of 100 sessions, let's say, we can look at this database and it says, look here, this viewer is always accurate when it comes to color, but sizes and shapes, go get another viewer, you know? And by then having a pool of viewers to work with, a customer comes in and wants to know the color of the getaway car, okay? And so we look through the database and we say, hey, this guy's always good on color. So we task him with the color. Now his overall average may be 70%. We look and the customer also wants to know the make and model of the car, okay? So we find out who's best at sizes and shapes, and we task them with that question because they're good at that. And so we can take a whole pool of viewers who have 70% accuracy, and by databasing and tasking people toward their strengths, we can come back to the customer with 90 to 95% accuracy, simply because we know exactly who's good at what. Mm-hmm. And you know, and this way we can provide a better service to our customer, even though we don't have a single remote viewer maybe who can make 98% accuracy overall. We can come back with 98% accuracy on the information. I have been asked about the future of remote viewing many times, and so I have sat down. Well, I have hidden that question in envelopes that I've shifted, you know, and shuffled around so that I don't know when I'm getting the question. And I've done this several times. The answer I keep coming up with is that remote viewing will be learned by more and more people. It will have more and more people developing it and honing it to where it gets better and better. And more, the truth will be available to everyone. Well, then you've got the mafia who learns that there are no secrets. You've got law enforcement who now learns that there are no secrets. That's dangerous to them too. You've got politicians who learn that there are no more secrets. You've got military people who learn that there are no more secrets. Okay, you know the kid that killed himself because of the hula hoop, and the kid that killed himself over rock and roll, and the kid that killed himself over Dungeons and Dragons and all. That same kid is going to kill himself over remote viewing. You know, I don't think the kid ever existed in the first place. But all of a sudden, preachers will start preaching against it. Teachers will start teaching against it. Someone who has taken a basic course 40 years ago in remote viewing commits a crime, and the headlines will read, "Remote viewer kills someone," you know, stuff like this. And the witch hunts will begin. It will all go back underground. And when it does, you'll have a government sitting there waiting, and it will pull from the best of that underground, and it'll all go back. And what has come around will go around. And from what I keep seeing, this whole thing about remote viewing in the public will be blown past, and the government will wind up with remote viewers that are better than it could have ever had in any other way. That's what I keep seeing for the future of remote viewing. Okay, for one thing, remote viewing doesn't verify anything. It just gives you the information. Okay? Second of all, who were these remote viewers? They were, you know, Madame Zoltar. They were, you know, people who didn't even know what remote viewing is, who don't know that it's a science. But there are all these people who have popped up. I've had people call me and tell me that they were Palm remote viewers and crystal ball remote viewers and aura remote viewers and all that. And I say, okay, well, how do you do it? Oh, well, I just sit back and I see it, you know. Remote viewing is a science. And when the information came out that the government used remote viewers for psychic spies, there were actually reporters driving around town looking for these palm signs on lawns so they could go into Madame Zoltar and say, "What is remote viewing?" Well, what's she going to say? It's what I've done all my life. Right now, there are so many definitions for remote viewing that it has no meaning. Ingo had invented what was called coordinate remote viewing because he used coordinates. Well, many people, and you know several of the teachers, who started just giving some random numbers at the beginning of a session and saying, "Look, I'm a coordinate remote viewer too. I'm a coordinate crystal ball remote viewer too." And not knowing at all what that meant or how to deal with it. And they started claiming scientific, you know, and touch, you know, touch with the science and everything else. Ingo finally came up with the word controlled, because these people don't want to be controlled. And the fact is, controlled remote viewing means your remote viewing is controlled by the viewer. The viewer is not controlled. But this ploy has worked. And so nobody's out there calling themselves controlled remote viewers. But the science of remote viewing passed from a pure science to the military, and then when it got into the public, it was just, you know, destroyed. The terminology was destroyed. And so then the scientific method came back and said, okay, we're going to take this one term that nobody else, you know, will use. And so everybody's out there listening to remote viewers and everybody's talking about remote viewing and all that. And for the most part, they have no idea what they're talking about. It's a sad situation, but it's expected, you know. Serious hypnotist had this same thing happen when hypnosis came out. And all of a sudden you had all these stage people making people clucking like chickens.
And medicine too.
And medicine too, yeah. And it's just a natural part. The science itself is called controlled remote viewing, is a very, very respectable, highly researched, documented science. Remote viewing, on the other hand, is whatever you want it to be. I would ask how to do it better. But I would not ask where the information comes from, because I don't care.
Okay.
People come to me and they say, well, it comes from spirit guides. And I say, oh, thank you for the information. They come to me and they say it comes from holograms in the universe. And I say, oh, thank you for that information. They come to me and they say, well, it comes from the supermind or the collective consciousness or whatever. And I say, thank you for that information. Listen, I don't care where it comes from. You bring that missing kid home, and it can come from wherever you want. I don't care. I'm very practically oriented. I'm very applications oriented. And if you want to believe it comes from your spirit guide or from God or from angels or wherever, and you can bring that kid home, hey, I'm happy. And you know, I really don't care where the information comes from. And if I ever found out where the information comes from, I would probably respond with, okay, now let's get to work. It's the way I am. Sorry.
Okay.
The right or wrong doesn't come in the information about the target. The right or wrong comes in taking the information from your body and onto the paper. Your conscious mind says, oh, I felt a warm flush. Therefore, the target must be hot. No, you write down, I felt a warm flush. You know, and let's say you get a a perception that there's snow at the site. Okay. Therefore, it must be wintertime. And you write down wintertime. No, there are ski runs all over that have snow in the middle of summer, even in warm weather, because it's man-made snow and all this. That didn't mean it's wintertime. And this interpretation goes on almost continuously with especially inexperienced remote viewers.
It could have been a cotton field also.
Could have been a cotton field, yeah, and they just thought it looked like snow.
Or looking on top of a mountain.
Whatever.
Yeah.
And the thing is that you get the perception through, you're supposed to write it down. You're supposed to be the village idiot. But this continual interpretation goes through. And pretty soon you think, there's snow, it's cold, therefore it must be winter. And so all of a sudden in your mind's eye, any person in the scene is wearing a heavy clothing. And, you know, all of the stereotypical things of winter start getting imagined into your scene. This is what happens with natural psychics, which is, you know, where they tend to mess up the most. And it happens with all remote viewers, no matter how experienced. But the more experienced you are, the more you learn to realize when it's happening and set it aside. And it's a natural human tendency, and it's one that you have to deal with. And the more experienced people deal with it better and more successfully. But the perceptions that come through almost always get interpreted before they land on the paper.
Certainly.
Yeah, it takes a very, very disciplined, controlled remote viewer to not interpret things. Just the facts, ma'am. The rule is get a perception, write it down, and then forget it. We have a rule that says there's no session above the line you're on. So if I got red and round and now I'm getting rubbery, I don't try to connect it with red and round. I just rubbery. Let's say I get red again. No, I can't get it again because there is no session above the line I'm on. And so I get red, I write red. I get red another time, I write red. And the art of skillful forgetting is great.
Well, that goes back to what we were saying about unlearning,
Unlearning, yeah.
not connecting, and
Yeah.
not drawing conclusions.
That's right. It's a very difficult thing for the human mind to do because we've been trained all of our life that the smart person is the one who can make these connections and understand more things and put the most labels and everything else. And in remote viewing, you have to go in just the opposite direction. The subconscious mind has got to be in total charge of the session. And if you let the conscious mind get in, it's just going to mess things up. Like I said earlier, you go out in the desert and you find that lamp and you rub it and the genie comes. You may get your wish, but that doesn't make you Aladdin.
Right.
One good session does not make you a top remote viewer, nor does it prepare you for doing police work, nor medical work or anything like that. And I have seen a lot of people who have had one psychic experience in their life, and so now they want to come in and help find missing children and find murderers and everything else. And it just doesn't work that way. Sadly, there are a lot of people who know that this tendency is true, that we want to rush into things. The magician's apprentice type syndrome. And so they will go out there and they will advertise that they teach remote viewing. And there is a thing called the first-timers effect. The first time you do a remote viewing session, you're almost always going to have a good success. It's going to wow you. It's great. Because you don't know any better, or your defenses aren't up and all that. And so they will go out and they'll give you an easy target. And we can talk about that if you want. There are some targets that are easy and some are hard. And they'll give you an easy target. You do well at it. And so they say, hey, you've got real talent. You're a good remote viewer. You need to come to my school. You come to the training. The first-timers effect wears off. Their training is not anywhere near what remote viewing actually is. And it's something they've made up on their own. And in the end, people go away saying, remote viewing is great, but I can't do it. And the would-be instructor has your money, so he's very happy. When you go to look for a remote viewing teacher, look for their qualifications. Look for, get references from their students. And if they won't give you, if they won't give your name to one of their students in order to have that student call you, then don't trust them. And like I had somebody call me last week, and they said that they and their group had done over 400 police cases. And I said, that's good. Did you do them for the police? And he said, oh, no, we got things out of the papers and newspaper, and we did the session, and Then we just waited, and, that's good practice. It's very good practice. But it's not professional. It's not real. And working with a real cop to do a real police case is the difference between what they're doing and the real police cases is like daylight and dark. There's also a reality to it. As long as you're doing sessions out of newspapers or pictures and envelopes and all that, it's good training. I mean, it's valuable training, but it's a parlor game. When you actually move into professional work, into real work for police, for archaeologists, for for doctors, for investors, business people, research and development, scientific development, when you start working these real world applications, it becomes real. And you say, okay, X, there ought to be something here on this map. But can you walk out into the field with an archaeologist and say, dig here? There's a whole difference between that. And there's a lot of difference between, working a case that's in the newspaper and dealing with the police, speaking their language, doing it in a professional way, providing the information in a way that police understand rather than a way that psychics understand. And the professionalism is a goal that is pretty far away for many people. However, it's not unattainable. And we have my company, we teach remote viewing. We also teach monitoring, CRV analyst, we teach report writers, we teach management. We teach corporations how to develop, staff, and protect complete remote viewing units within their corporation, just as the United States had for the intelligence effort. And we've got one that has a larger remote viewing unit than the U.S. military had. And they're doing great work. Along with training all the different people, we teach OPSEC, operations security, so that they can have that unit within that company, and the other people in the unit, the other people in the company don't know it's there, don't know where the information comes from, because the information gets reported in other channels and all that. So it's a complete secret, and that way their competition doesn't know that they have that unit there either. And remote viewing units within corporations, I foresee as being once the corporations realize that this tool is there, I see it as being a very integral part. And that if your competition doesn't have a remote viewing unit, hey, you've got the upper hand. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's going to become a very real thing once the hee-haw gets out of it and the parlor game gets out of it, and it becomes a professional thing. And that's what we're doing. We have training at all the different levels. We have, beyond that, we have an apprenticeship program. And that apprenticeship program is an in-depth, really difficult program that leads you from practice targets into real-world work. And then once you become professional, we have a guild of absolute professional remote viewers who are really the top viewers in the world at this point. And they are professionals. And they work together. And as you're coming through the apprenticeship program, the professionals in the guild one-to-one, become your mentors, your sponsors, and so forth, and actually sponsor you all the way through to get you from being able to remote view pictures in envelopes and things like that, all the way up to a professional level. It's a long, hard road. But hey, any science is, you know. The remote viewing that's out there is high school physics class. We're talking about beyond doctorate level work and all that. And we have turned it into a professional thing, and we're doing a lot of good. You won't. We do almost all of our work very quietly, surreptitiously. Companies don't want their competition or their customers or anyone to know that they've got remote viewers working for them, because even still, the scientific act of remote viewing is tied by the press with psychic, which is a dirty word in the English language for some reason. I don't know why. But the work that we do for certain customers will, of course, never come out into the civilian world. And the work that we do for companies, corporations, that's proprietary information. And there are those people who will get out there and say, oh, we worked for this corporation and that corporation. And you can always say, yeah, you're not working for them anymore, are you? Because that corporation's not coming back. Right. And we protect our customers. And I've been in Intel over half my life. Mm-hmm. I know how to keep a secret. Mm-hmm. So we protect our customers. And I would say that 99.9% of the work we do, you're never going to hear about it. In a timely manner, yes, is the big word. The answer is yes. The answer is also that they have been found, but not in a timely manner. Okay. There are some things that, it was like when we were working hostages in the military. You find out where they are, but the next day they're moved. Okay. And so, that whole area of applications is fraught with unexpected walls and barriers and everything else that you don't find out about until you actually go there. By the way, a lot of people come to me and they say, I want to learn remote viewing because I want to help find missing kids. And I try to inform them that they may not know what they're talking about. I have seen many a good natural psychic, really good and talented natural psychic, who has had no training in how to deal with the emotions and everything else, and who is sort of at the mercy of their talent. And they will get into a group, and that group says, okay, there's a missing kid, we're going to find that missing kid. Well, for the rest of the group, that's fine. They get information and all that. But here's this one really good natural psychic. And that really good natural psychic actually mentally accesses that child and goes through the process of being molested, murdered, dismembered, and spread across who knows how much land. Mm-hmm. That good natural psychic will not be back, because the experience of having to go through that is just too much. And, we try to warn people, don't be the magician's apprentice. Learn how to deal with these things and before you actually do them. When we train people through the apprentice program, it is at least 6 months of progressively more realistic cases. And when a viewer, if it's police cases, when a viewer says, "I don't want any more of this," that's where we stop. And I mean, you take a raw recruit and throw them into a case like that, and they'll never be back. You'll never see them again because the experience of going through it is too much. One of the problems of accessing people, finding missing children and all that, is that although it never happens to you, in the remote viewing process, it becomes part of your memory. And you have to live with that memory the rest of your life. And people come to a point where they say, "I don't want another memory like that." And so this is a serious thing. This remote viewing thing, it's not a toy. It's the real thing. And I mean, we had, at any time, we never had more than 6 remote viewers for the United States. And we serve the entire United States intelligence community on 6 viewers. And now that we're getting more and more professional level viewers, we're able to branch out and do more. But we try to tell people, don't jump into this. This is real. It's not a parlor game. It's not a toy. It's the real thing.
That's certainly, in fact, it's certainly true.
Yeah, and we warn people, and not everybody takes warnings very well. And a lot of people get mentally or emotionally hurt in the process. As you learn the real remote viewing, the controlled remote viewing, changes will happen in your life. And those changes are almost always for the better. But that doesn't mean they feel good. A lot of medicine has pretty bad taste. Mm-hmm. But there are changes that will take place, and you will grow as you learn to connect those two halves. One of the first things that happens is your subconscious mind, which has always been a child, begins to mature. And believe it or not, through the controlled remote viewing process, your subconscious mind can become a full adult. And it's faster, it's smarter, and so the process happens with your subconscious faster than it happened with your conscious mind or your body. And you can actually grow up and become an adult at the subconscious level. The difference that's going to make in your life is phenomenal. I mean, it's just can't even be estimated. Along with that, you're going to change. And this is one of the dangers we talk to people about before they get into the real remote viewing. As you change, maybe your friends won't. And your friends, you'll wind up having a new set of friends. And yet your life is going to change. Your circumstances are going to change. Usually your finances change for the better too. That's a plus. But many things in life, your ability to think, your ability to realize. We have one exercise that we give to people that will make them so totally aware of their surroundings that it's just, I have had people call me back and say, I'm 45 years old, and for the first time in my life, I woke up. I've been asleep for 45 years. And the reason we teach this exercise is, if you can't sit in this room and describe what's behind you, how am I going to send your mind halfway around the world and have it describe anything there? And so you have to become totally aware. Now the Japanese, the ninja, call this sake no jitsu. total awareness within 360 degrees around you. And it's a very trainable thing. And we train that simply because if you can't do it here, I can't send your mind halfway around the world and have you do it there. So we have to train many of the martial arts to a remote viewer in order to make them a remote viewer. This isn't one of those psychic clubs where you get together and put the envelope to your forehead. It's a science.